Recently, Russian media exposed a scandal involving the Chinese Communist Party, which quickly caught attention due to its connection to the Russia-Ukraine war. On May 2nd, the X account, Born in Kiev, posted that the Russian National Guard received a batch of electronic warfare systems from China, called burners. However, these systems were found to be defective, incapable of countering drones as promised. The equipment, worth over 820 million rubles, turned out to be fake and non-functional. According to Russian news outlet Pravda, the contract for these drone detection and disruption systems was signed in November 2023. However, once the systems were delivered to the front lines in Ukraine, it became clear that they didn't meet the claimed technical specifications. Sources revealed to Pravda that the Chinese burners were essentially blind. They couldn't detect drones at all. Military experts believe this news carries significant and sensitive implications. This is military equipment intended for use at the front lines, and such criticism of aid to an ally before the war ends goes beyond typical complaints about product quality. It suggests a rupture in strategic cooperation. In response to Russia's unusual emotional reaction, reports suggest that CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping is willing to risk his life to attend Russia's Victory Day parade. Recently, the Russian president's press secretary announced that Russia would hold a Victory Day parade on May 9th, with more than 20 heads of state and government leaders expected to attend. Upon hearing this, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky immediately issued a statement declaring that Ukraine would not guarantee the safety of world leaders attending the May 9th celebration in Moscow. He explained that some countries had contacted Kiev, stating they would attend and requesting Ukraine to ensure their safety. He said that Ukraine will not be responsible for what happens within the Russian Federation. He also added that the responsibility for ensuring guest safety lies with Russia, but he warned that Russia might take actions such as arson or explosions and then blame Ukraine. Confirmed attendees for next Friday's Moscow parade include the presidents of Vietnam and Laos. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who had previously acknowledged sending troops to Russia, decided to stay in Pyongyang with his daughter and will not attend. Slovakia's prime minister and India's prime minister both canceled their trips to Russia, citing health or schedule issues. The most eye-catching of all is CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping, who has publicly stated that he will attend the parade to continue supporting Russia. Analysts believe that despite the risks, Xi must attend, as the CCP is the only one to have gained significant benefits from the ongoing 3-year war between Russia and Ukraine. Recently, there have been reports revealing that the Chinese Communist Party is supplying weapons to both Russia and Ukraine. Through sending large numbers of military technicians to Russia, the CCP is learning advanced communication technologies for modern battlefields. They're also collecting data on NATO and US-made weapons to study the tactical systems of Western combat forces, preparing for a potential military strike on Taiwan. The Jamestown Foundation, a U.S. defense policy think tank, published its latest China report on March 28th. It found that the Chinese military is sending large quantities of high-tech arms to Russia, aiming to gain real combat experience with drones, drone jamming, and autonomous systems to enhance its military strength, especially for its strategy in the Taiwan Strait. The report specifically highlights that Chinese military equipment manufacturers have also been similar arms to Ukraine. Some factories have even openly displayed the Ukrainian flag, indicating collaboration with Ukrainian drone manufacturers. The report states that China is testing the ability of drones to be jammed or counterattacked, and is gathering tactical information from Ukrainian forces and NATO military aid. Sunny Chung, a Hong Kong-born researcher who authored the report, pointed out that China's apparent support for Ukraine against Russia is not aimed at attacking Russia, but rather learning from Ukraine. The CCP understands that Ukraine's skills in operating and coordinating drones are superior to Russia's, making Ukraine effective in resisting Russian invasions. Therefore, China aims to learn more from Ukraine's capabilities. Chung also suggested that the CCP may be using espionage to infiltrate and collect strategic intelligence from Ukraine, testing its own drones' real combat capabilities and upgrading its products accordingly. So, what has China learned from the conflict? The report notes that over the past 3 years of the Russia-Ukraine war, Chinese military experts and the People's Liberation Army have observed that Russian forces primarily use small and medium-sized drones for reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, and limited local attacks, while relying on radar detection and electronic jamming as the main countermeasures against drones. After Iran's Shahed-136 drones and FPV drones were introduced, Russian forces began using them for large-scale indiscriminate bombing operations. The drone's speed, flexibility, and low cost shortened the kill chain, accelerating the time from target identification to attack. This greatly enhanced Russian capabilities in attack and surveillance, especially in assaults on armored vehicles and infrastructure. This tactic was described by Chinese experts as a significant transformation. The CCP also studied the tactical evolution of Russian drone operators. For example, in the Zaporizhia region of Ukraine, Russian forces successfully employed a dual drone tactic. The first drone destroyed the protective net of Ukrainian tanks, and the second drone precisely attacked the weak points, using fiber optic guidance technology to avoid electronic jamming. The report concludes that traditional radar detection and electronic jamming are not enough for defense. Future defenses must combine AI, electronic warfare, high-energy lasers, and high-power microwave technologies. For example, experts from the PLA's Unit 68398 pointed out that Ukraine, with NATO support, has enhanced the accuracy and lethality of its drone operations. They said real-time integration is crucial for drone operations. The integration of AI and drone technology will become a core element of future battlefields, improving drone decision-making abilities and being used to counter enemy drone swarms and autonomous system threats. Interestingly, after a U.S. think tank exposed China's simultaneous provision of weapons to both sides, Ukrainian President Zelensky publicly accused the CCP of supplying military aid for Russia. He said this for the first time on April 17th. The next day, he announced sanctions against 3 Chinese companies. On the 17th, Zelensky stated that based on intelligence from the country's security service, there was evidence showing that the CCP had been aiding Russia's invasion of Ukraine by producing weapons and equipment within Russian territory. However, he did not specify whether the equipment involved was ammunition, artillery, or drones. According to the Kiev Independent, China has clearly become a source of weapons for Russia, violating its promise not to aid Russia militarily. China is now supporting Russia's aggressive ambitions alongside Iran and North Korea. On April 18th, the Ukrainian authorities published the latest sanctions list, which included Beijing Kongtai Xianghui Technology Company, Ruijin Machinery Company, and Zhongfu Shenyang Carbon Fiber Xining Company. These companies are now banned from operating in Ukraine, and their assets there will be frozen. It's evident that after the exposure of Chinese military manufacturers assembling drones within Ukraine, Zelensky had no choice but to distance himself from China, terminating cooperation with these companies. In fact, both Russia and Ukraine have been infiltrated by the CCP during the war, and China has exploited both sides. U.S. President Donald Trump saw this clearly, which is why he expressed that he might exit the Russia-Ukraine peace mediation. On April 26, just before Pope Francis's funeral, Zelensky had a 15-minute meeting with Trump at the Vatican. According to Axios News, 2 sources revealed that Zelensky urged Trump to adopt a stronger stance against Putin, while still considering unconditional ceasefire as the starting point for negotiations. Previously, Ukraine had accepted, but Russia had rejected this proposal. It said that this time, Trump seemed to agree and urged Zelensky to sign the U.S.-Ukraine mineral agreement soon. On April 29th, in an exclusive interview with ABC at the White House, Trump recalled his meeting with Zelensky at St. Peter's Basilica. Trump said, "The moment was a moment of solace in a sense, because tremendous numbers of people are dying. A lot of his people are dying. They're being killed, and I feel very badly about it." In the interview, Trump also criticized Putin, stating that Putin's missile strikes on towns and civilian areas in recent days were unwarranted. This made him feel that perhaps Putin didn't want to stop the war and was just using him. At a routine press briefing, the State Department stated that it was now time for both sides to prevent specific proposals to end the conflict. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that if the negotiations do not make progress, the U.S. will exit the mediation process. So why would Trump's exit from the Russia-Ukraine mediation be a heavy blow to Putin? This is because Trump has already achieved his strategic goal, exposing the hidden hand controlling the war, the CCP. Trump has already given Putin a chance to exit the Russia-Ukraine war and sever ties with the CCP. If Trump truly withdraws from the mediation, he will lose strategic maneuvering space, and Russia will face real punishment and consequences from the U.S. government. Unlike anything ever before, this will inevitably drag the Russian people into a deeper crisis, serving as a funeral for the CCP as well. Therefore, Putin bringing up the topic of the CCP at this moment may be a gesture aimed at sending a message to Trump that he's ready to sever ties with his former ally. From the moment Trump took office, he actively mediated the Russia-Ukraine war because he saw that the U.S. was expending a significant amount of resources in this distant conflict without achieving any strategic objectives. Meanwhile, the U.S. faced a dire shortage of conventional weaponry, directly threatening its ability to assist Taiwan in a potential conflict, which is exactly what the CCP wanted. Trump quickly recognized the CCP's devious nature, so he acted decisively. While attempting to mediate this war that primarily benefited the CCP, he also opened a new front, the trade war. After issuing a final ultimatum to both sides of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the U.S.-Ukraine mineral agreement was finally reached on April 30th. This agreement grants the U.S. the right to prioritize participation in Ukraine's new mining transactions and provides funding for Ukraine's reconstruction. The joint investment fund created by the agreement will be used to support Ukraine's rebuilding efforts and is one of Trump's key efforts to push the peace process forward. On May 1st, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that the U.S.-Ukraine mineral agreement is a comprehensive economic partnership that will enable President Trump to negotiate more forcefully with Russia. In an interview with Fox News, Bessent said that this agreement sends a clear message to Russia. Bessent said, "It showed Russian leadership that there is no daylight between the Ukrainian people and the American people. The American people don't make any money if Ukrainians don't prosper, so now we're fully aligned in terms of economics." He added that this comprehensive economic partnership covers rare earths, infrastructure, and energy, creating a win-win opportunity for both sides. The U.S. Treasury Department statement mentioned Russia's full-scale invasion and added that any country or individual funding or supplying Russia's war machine cannot benefit from Ukraine's reconstruction. The U.S. heavily relies on imported mineral resources. According to data from the U.S. Geological Survey, the U.S. is completely dependent on imports for 12 of the 50 critical minerals, and for another 16, it relies on imports for over half. Since the CCP has long dominated the global supply chain for rare earths and other strategic minerals, Western countries are urgently seeking alternative sources, including Ukraine. Ukraine has stated that it holds known reserves of 22 of the critical minerals. It has some of the world's largest reserves of graphite, lithium, titanium, beryllium, and uranium, all of which are considered critical materials by the U.S. Some of these reserves are still under Russian occupation. The successful signing of the mineral agreements is a major victory for Trump. Ensuring the security of critical minerals is one of the key reasons why Trump has been pushing to mediate the war. Although Putin has repeatedly claimed that Russia can provide rare earth minerals to the U.S., the uncertainty surrounding Russia and its inflated price demands, especially given its tangled relationship with the CCP. On the same day that the mineral agreement was signed, Putin faced another heavy blow. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham announced on April 30th that the U.S. Senate is actively advancing a sanctions bill against Russia. The proposal has already gained bipartisan support from 72 senators, showing rare unity in its tough stance. The bill would impose punitive tariffs of up to 500% on any country that continues to purchase Russian oil, natural gas, and strategic products, aiming to cut off the external financial support for Russia's war economy. This bill is seen as a significant strategic adjustment, as Washington seeks to exert pressure on Russia through economic leverage amid the war's deadlock. According to the draft, the sanctions would extend to any third-party country or company doing business with Russia's energy and military industries, particularly targeting Asian and Middle Eastern countries still buying Russian oil. Analysts point out that if the bill passes, it will not only reshape the global energy trade landscape, but also significantly impact countries maintaining economic ties with Russia, especially major energy importers like China, India, and Turkey. It would also represent the highest level of sanctions on Russia through a single piece of legislation since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. Meanwhile, British intelligence has added more pressure, releasing battlefield information that is highly unfavorable to Russia. The Euromaidan press from Ukraine cited the latest update from the British Defense Intelligence Agency on May 3, 2025. It stated that since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the Russian military may have suffered about 950,000 casualties, and 2025 is projected to become the most devastating year for Moscow's forces. The latest intelligence shows that in just the first 4 months of 2025, Russia has already suffered around 160,000 casualties. According to the Ukrainian General Staff report, in April 2025, Russia's average daily casualties exceeded 1,200, with a total of 36,000 casualties for the month. Despite these massive casualties, Russia's territorial gains have been minimal. According to Forbes, in April, Russian forces occupied about 68 square miles of Ukrainian territory, with casualties surpassing 36,600. At this rate, Forbes estimates that Russia would still need 231 years from now to fully occupy Ukraine, theoretically requiring an army of 101 million troops. Despite these losses, Russia continues to recruit about 30,000 new soldiers every month. The number of Russian troops in Ukraine has risen to about 600,000, the highest levels since the invasion began. The British assessment concludes that despite continued heavy losses, by 2025, Russia still has not been able to translate its major losses into significant progress in Ukraine. Putin, deeply tied to the CCP, faces increasing pressure, while CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping's recent actions, especially in the face of Trump's direct attacks, seem even more surprising. Gordon Chang, a Chinese-American expert on Chinese issues, recently stated that the CCP's approach to counteracting U.S. tariffs is extremely wrong. He said, "At a time when China needs friends, because it's not selling goods to the U.S., it's going out of its way to antagonize not just the Philippines, not just Taiwan, but also South Korea and Australia. This shows that this is an end-of-regime conduct, because Xi Jinping can't appear to be giving in to the U.S." He added that this is indeed very confusing behavior, which indicates serious problems in Beijing right now. It gives us insight into the current state of the CCP's political system, which is both stubborn and inflexible. At a sensitive moment, Russian media exposed that Chinese military aid to Russia consisted of substandard products. On May 4th, Russia suddenly stated that reconciliation between Russia and Ukraine is inevitable, calling it just a matter of time. Some netizens pointed out that Putin is currently under immense pressure from the U.S.-Ukraine agreement, but perhaps the most anxious person is not Putin, but Xi Jinping. The possibility of ceasefire is indeed an option for him. However, he may still be deceived by the CCP, holding on to illusions of winning the war and fully occupying Ukraine. As a result, he is demanding too high a price for Trump's offer of goodwill. If Russia eventually succumbs to the U.S. sanctions and agrees to a ceasefire, the CCP will not only lose the opportunity to continue benefiting from the war, but will also face the collapse of the Sino-Russian wartime alliance. The CCP, isolated and at odds with the entire world, will no longer be able to sustain itself. With Trump now free to act, he's unlikely to give Xi Jinping much room to breathe.